Hello there, and welcome to the Raising Musos podcast, where we talk about music education to educate and support parents of young musicians. My name is Eliza Bourgault, and I'm obviously the host of this podcast, but I am also a harp and piano teacher with about a decade of experience. And I now actually manage a little music school in Joondalup, which is located to the north of Perth in Western Australia. And we offer piano, harp, violin, flute, and singing lessons. I believe that's all. And so throughout my career so far, one thing that I noticed is how little parents know when it comes to learning an instrument. And this is why I started this podcast. So if you are a parent, then welcome to this podcast, and I hope that you are going to find it useful. I talk about things like practice, things to look for in a teacher, performance anxiety. I talk a lot about practice and other little things like that are designed to really help parents know how to best support their child. Because learning music it's a big commitment. And there's certain best practices that you can start doing and implementing around the home to really ensure success for your child. So that's what this podcast is designed for. And today is episode 21. So I launched this podcast back in January 2025. And now we are in May, so I've been doing those weekly episodes. So let me know how you're finding the podcast so far. I love getting feedback either on specific episodes or on the podcast in general. My intention was to have regular interviews, maybe like once a month, but I just do not have the bandwidth at the moment to organize that, to contact guests, to set up interview times that suit everybody, to go to a little recording studio. I'm just very busy with all of the other things that I do as a music school manager, I suppose. But I would definitely love to have more guests on the show. So if you have any ideas for people you would like me to speak to, then please let me know. I would love to hear, and hopefully in the next couple of months to years, I'll have some more interviews as part of this podcast. But for today, the podcast is just me. So I hope you're not too bored of my voice. And gosh, a few months back, I made an episode about what to look for in a teacher. And so I thought for today I would talk about a similar topic, but from a different point of view, and that is the red flags to look for in a teacher. So things you want to pay attention to and notice in a teacher that is going to tell you they might not really be worth your time and your investment. So I assume that, if you are a parent considering music lessons, the experience you're looking for your child is that they're going to be learning in a supportive, in an effective, and in a positive environment. And really what this comes down to is the teacher, because a really amazing and great teacher will inspire in their student a lifelong love of learning and of music. But on the other hand, a not so great teacher will probably result in your child hating music, avoiding it, and losing interest and having no confidence. So, even if your child loves music, putting them with the wrong teacher could actually impact how much they love music. And so you obviously want to find a teacher that your child is really going to love. And so I'm just here today to share with you some signs to look for. As I said, some red flags you want to pay attention to before you choose a teacher. And of course, when you are researching for a teacher, take your time. Don't just go to the first one that you see or that you come across. If you are able to meet them in person first, I would highly recommend that, because you can tell so much from a person by the way they come across in person, much better than through email or through text. So that's the intro. So I'm going to start talking about the first red flag. And the red flag number 1 is that a teacher you want to avoid will make lessons feel like a chore. So ideally, music lessons should be engaging and enjoyable, because then your kid will really genuinely want to come back and return to learn more. And even if the content, like the pieces or the repertoire or the exercises, are challenging, there is still, the challenge is still enjoyable for them, because the teacher is able to make the lesson inspiring and engaging. So if your child dreads attending their lessons, or perhaps feels bored by the lessons, or isn't engaged, then that would be a red flag that the teacher isn't perhaps the most suited teacher for your child. And a good teacher finds ways to keep the lessons interesting and will be able to adapt to some extent to suit what the child needs and what their learning style is. So whereas a less good teacher will probably be quite rigid in their approach, maybe they will not show much enthusiasm, or they just will not make the lesson relevant to the student. I'm going to give you an example from my own experience as a piano student. My first teacher was, according to this definition anyway, not a very good teacher. She scared me, and I did definitely dread my piano lessons. I was always nervous during my lessons, very afraid of making mistakes. I often cried during my lessons because of how embarrassed I would feel by the mistakes that I would make. She was just very strict. Lessons were not very fun. And so now that I'm a teacher, I obviously do pay a lot of attention to that. I try to have high standards with what I want my students to achieve, but maybe I don't have as high standards as to how serious a lesson is. I have started adopting a lot of games into my lessons, which students just love. So I use a lot of games in my lessons. I always make some time for a bit of rapport with my students. So the lessons feel very personal for each student. And although the curriculum that I use is fairly similar across all of my students. I do make, I do like go off my expected curriculum to suit the goals and aspirations of each student so that, the lessons feel relevant to them. So if a student comes up to me and wants to play a particular song, I'm not going to just downright dismiss that. I try to think of a way that we can make that song possible for that particular student. So I'm able to adapt within the rigidity of my curriculum, and I keep lessons interesting and engaging for students by incorporating a lot of games and a lot of time for rapport. And so that's how my teaching style has evolved over the years, and also probably as a result of my own pretty terrible experience when I was very young taking piano lessons. So if you're able to have a trial lesson with a potential teacher, just look at how engaged your child is and also how engaged the teacher is whilst they're teaching. Because if lessons feel like a chore, then that's a red flag, and you just don't want that kind of experience for your child. Okay, so that was red flag number 1. Red flag number 2 is a lack of professionalism. And I really agree with this. And the reason is I really pride myself and my music school as a whole on our professionalism. So that's something that I've always really valued. But if a potential teacher lacks professionalism, then I would definitely strongly not recommend that teacher. And so a lack of professionalism could come across in a number of different ways. It could be things like frequently cancelling lessons or cancelling at the very last moment, or maybe they are late, or maybe they just like forget about the lesson they're supposed to teach. Maybe they don't have any clear policies or expectations, or they're not professional about how to pay, and also they're disorganized, so they don't keep track of what the students are doing and they forget, and it's just a jumble in their head what the students are learning. So, and look, we have to also be understanding about the different types of teachers out there. Like, some tutors are obviously not, they are probably not professional musicians in the first place, and they might be doing tutoring as a fun like side hustle. So because they're not serious about it, they are also not professional in how they run their tutoring side hustle, because it's actually not that important to them. And so because they are not very committed, then it comes across as a lack of professionalism in how they deal with parents and students. Whereas, people who are actually committed to being good teachers and in growing a business, who are committed to seeing results for their students, will definitely, or they should be, a lot more professional about how they manage. So looking back at my own journey, when I first started, I lacked professionalism. I'm not afraid to say I did not have any policies around makeup lessons, cancellations. I was cancelling lessons frequently because of gigs. I was also very flexible with the scheduling of lessons, because obviously like students were asking for makeups and I was also asking for makeups all the time. People would pay me by cash or by electronic transfer. There was no like one mean of payment. And that's the reason I was like that, is because I was not expecting and I was not intending to actually do this my whole life. I was expecting to get a job at some point, and so the teaching was just like a fun thing that I did as demanded it. And then over the years, I really made the conscious choice of becoming more and more professional so that I can actually make a living from this career. So a lack of professionalism is really a red flag when you are willing to invest into your child's education. If maybe you are not like 100% about music lessons, then probably you'd be fine with a teacher who lacks professionalism, but that also means that you would be less likely to see the results that you are wanting, right? So the more professional the teacher is, the more likely you are that your child's going to love music, and then you're going to have a good experience, and that your child is going to stick to it for the long term. So a good teacher basically is someone who's reliable. Then they're not going to cancel on you. They are clear about their communication and expectations, and they respect your time. Okay. Red flag number 3 is a teacher who has a one-size-fits-all approach. And so a bad teacher forces every student to learn the same pieces the same way with no flexibility. They might also, as I said before, dismiss a student's musical interest. So they might be like a classically trained musician and they only allow classical music. And they don't approach their learning style to different needs, to different ages, or to different learning styles. And so the opposite of that is a good teacher would tailor their lessons to the student, and they're able to balance learning repertoire with good technique and musical development while keeping the lessons quite personalized to their student. Pardon me. And so again, as I said before, like I think my approach is pretty like one size fits all, and that's because I just found the methods that I, the method books and the curriculums and the pieces that I enjoy teaching, that I find have value in learning. But that doesn't mean that I teach all of my students exactly the same. I think if you saw my lessons, you would see that I teach everyone quite differently. Sometimes I might spend a lesson more on practice, other times more on theories. So I don't teach every student the same way, even though I might teach the same material. And even then, I don't always teach the same material. It really depends on the student. But if a teacher is like just very focused on one particular way of doing things, that would tell me that they're a little bit close-minded. Maybe they lack courage, they're afraid of trying new things. So that would be my 2 cents on that, and that's why it's a red flag. So the next one, red flag number 4, is a focus on perfection over progress. Oof, I would say that was definitely like the red flag in my very first teacher that I ever had. Focus on perfection over progress. And so basically what that would look like is the teacher just getting really annoyed and frustrated at mistakes. That's really what that is. So like a bad teacher would just criticize a student way more than they encourage the student. They create an environment where the student feels anxious or pressured, and they expect immediate perfection instead of gradual progress. Yeah, I definitely experienced that as a kid. As I said before, when I used to go to my piano lessons, I was so very nervous. My hands would actually be shaking during my lessons while I played to my teacher because I was so afraid of making mistakes. And I would be like doing air practice in the car on my way to my lesson. That's how anxious I was about it all. And you don't want that kind of experience for your child, but so what should you look for instead is a teacher who can actually be encouraging, especially they're able to like notice progress. They're able to notice things that are done well and they actually praise those things rather than criticize the negative things. And if the teacher is criticizing, then it has to be done, there's a certain delivery where criticism can be received without it feeling personal or that you're a failure. So the delivery. So is the teacher, like, how much praise is the teacher providing? But also, are they able to communicate criticism and feedback in a way that's not going to make the student feel horrible about themselves? And is the teacher, like, how much patience does the teacher have when it comes to mistakes? And honestly, I would say I'm a pretty patient person with mistakes when my students make mistakes. And I think it's because, I've been through it all. I know what it's like to learn something new. And I've been playing piano for so many years, been playing harp for many years as well. I still make mistakes. So it's like, what's the deal of a mistake, honestly? So that's how I feel about them. And I think that's what makes my students very comfortable in lessons and, why they learn quickly. Okay, so that was red flag number 4. Now moving on to red flag number 5 is they don't foster a positive student-teacher relationship. So students learn best when they feel safe, respected, and valued. And so a teacher who doesn't make their student feel that way, it's a bit of a red flag. So this sort of links up to other points that I talked about before. But a red flag is if the teacher is cold, intimidating, or they are dismissive. Maybe they don't really take the time to nurture a connection with their student. They don't really build rapport with them. They don't show that they care about the students. And maybe they make students feel like they're a burden and they discourage like curiosity and questions from their students. So that's more about like the human relationship aspect of learning music. So whereas a good teacher creates an encouraging environment and students can express themselves freely, they are not afraid of asking questions because they're not going to be made to feel dumb for asking questions. So look out for that too, in what kind of environment the teacher creates during learning and how much of themselves are they investing in this teacher-student relationship. Red flag number 6. There's one more after this one and then we'll be done. Red flag number 6. Ooh, I also really like this one. They don't show a willingness to keep learning. So basically, when a teacher becomes really stuck in their way and very hesitant to learn new things or try new things or change the way they do things. So the best teachers are learning consistently. They reflect on what they do. They reflect on their students' experience, their students' progress, And they try to look for new ways, or better, I should say, better ways of doing things if they're sort of like unhappy with what they see and how they feel. So a bad teacher refuses to try new ways of doing things, or they refuse to try new methods. They dismiss new research in music education, or they just ignore other ways of teaching. They might be very reluctant to get feedback, or to, invest in professional development. Whereas a good teacher, on the other hand, as I said, is someone who's curious about getting better and improving their craft and their skills. So they might be investing in courses, maybe they have a mentor, or they are just refining their own, musical skills themselves. And I can say that's actually true of me. I don't have this red flag in myself. I'm happy about that. So as I'll tell you that when I started teaching piano, I didn't know what I was doing. Obviously, I'm a good enough pianist, but I found myself really not liking how I taught piano. I was seeing all these really, I was very displeased with my piano students, with their technique, their lack of reading skills, lack of oral skills. I was like, oh, why can't I get my piano students to play better? And obviously it was nothing to do with them personally, because they were following my instructions. Most of them actually did the homework. So I was like, I know it has something to do with me and the way that I teach. So then what I did is I invested in a piano pedagogy course. It cost me maybe $1,000. Okay, maybe not that much. Oh, maybe. It was it was like a monthly subscription thing for a year. So I did a year of piano pedagogy course. I changed my entire methods that I use, and I really just, the way that I taught piano just changed so much. And I was just able to, I was able to reflect on my lack of expertise. I was able to try to fix it and then implement what I had learnt. And every once in a while I will try to look up some tutorials or some new things for how to teach either piano or oral or even harp. So yeah, if a teacher comes to me and they're like, oh, I know how to do things, then I would be like, oh, that's kind of arrogant. And sure, after a while, probably, teachers know what works best, and so they might genuinely have a right to say, I'm going to use this method, this is how we're going to learn. But if they are not even willing to hear about something new or try something new, I would say that's concerning. Okay, so as I said, there's only one red flag left to talk about, and this is that a red flag in a teacher is when they don't help students set goals. Whereas a good music teacher should be guiding students toward particular goals and milestones. So it could be things like moving from one grade to the next, performing at a concert, sitting an audition, or improving a particular technique, being able to learn a song by yourself. All those kinds of things are particular milestones that a teacher can help a student decide on and also work towards. So an average teacher has no particular plan for progress. They don't even know what their goals are for their students. They don't really set any challenges for their students, or they don't really help them prepare for big events like performances, exams, or personal goals. And so basically what that results in is students feel like they're stagnating, they're not moving forward because they actually don't know what they're working towards, because the teacher doesn't know it either. So a good teacher helps students set achievable goals, and a good teacher will also celebrate with the student when those goals are finally achieved. Okay, so what do you do if you actually notice those red flags in a potential teacher? Or maybe it's even the teacher that you already have now. So what can you do? So first of all, have a conversation, get to know the teacher a little bit better. Depending on what the issue is, just talk to them. Observe the lessons so that you can see firsthand what is happening and what the issue is that maybe your child has expressed to you or is experiencing, so that you can make a more informed decision. Trust what your child says. If they feel uncomfortable or uninspired during lessons, they probably mean it, because if they were enjoying it, they wouldn't make a fuss about it. And then basically what you have to do is just look for a new teacher, or look for a different teacher, until you find one who is passionate about what they do, they're professional in their approach, and they really care about their students. So that's basically me. I'm kidding. Well, I'm not kidding, but obviously I can't teach every person out there. All right, and there are a lot of amazing tutors all around the world, even online, so take your time looking for the right person. Okay, so there you go, that's it for today. So let me just conclude by saying that, as I said before, a teacher makes or breaks passion for music. So a great music teacher is more than just someone who will tell you what to do. They act as a mentor, as a guide, and even as someone who motivates you, a motivator. They should inspire, support, and challenge their students in a positive way. And if you ever feel like something isn't right, it's okay to ask questions, address concerns, and even switch teachers if needed. So I hope this episode was really useful for you, helped you see some new things. So I would love to hear what has been your experience with your teachers. Have you had really amazing teachers, or maybe did you have some teachers with red flags that I talked about today? So I'd love to hear your thoughts. You can send me a message on Instagram. My handle is @musicmakersacademy, or you can send me an email. My address is hello@musicmakersacademy.com.au. So that's it for today. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll speak to you in episode 22 next week.